You know, I'm not the smartest cookie in the jar, but when you look up on stage like this, there is one really beautiful rose amongst these other roses, you know. I think a couple of the rose petals on these certain ones are starting to wilt, but there's a beautiful rose in the midst of all of this that I think is fantastic. And so this morning, do me a huge favor, because again, God wants to speak through people, and it's not restricted to age, and it's not restricted to gender. It's solely based on availability. So this young lady made herself available for us today. And so do me a huge favor and welcome Katie Frickle.
Well, hi everyone. So like you just said, my name is Katie Frickle, and I just want to let you know that y'all are really scary. Like, I'm down there and you're like normal human beings, and I like step up here and it's like everyone just got fangs or something. So just wanted to clear that up. But I want to give you all a quick snapshot into what God has been teaching me this last year. Looking back over the last year, it was the hardest of my life. But even given everything that happened, I wouldn't go back and change it for anything, because I'm a totally different girl today. And God used those tough experiences to make me into who I am now. So the last 4 years, I've competed in a sport called equestrian eventing. And this past June, I was about to make my debut at the highest level in Utah, and my horse and I couldn't have felt more prepared. At the end of the 3-day competition, over the last jump, my horse and I had a fluke accident, and I blew my PCL in my knee. As the days went by after my accident, I couldn't do any of the things that I usually did to fill my time and energy, and I began to feel really discouraged. Not only was my season of competing over, but I wasn't even sure if I'd ever ride my horse again. My mind went straight into the worst case scenario, where all I could see was everything I'd missed out on and how I might not even make it to any of my future competitive or professional goals. The next couple weeks, it really felt like I was fighting with myself. Part of me knew that I should trust God and his ultimate plan, and the other part of me was falling into depression, looking at everything I'd lost and couldn't do and how all my plans were falling apart. I didn't want to face each day watching the world go by as I sat in my room unable to do anything. One night during worship at youth, they played the song Reckless Love, which most of you are probably familiar with. I'd heard it many times before, but that night I couldn't get the lyrics out of my head. I just kept hearing the line, "There's no lie you won't tear down coming after me," over and over, and I felt like God was speaking directly to me. I broke down in tears because in that moment, God told me that the lie I'd been holding on to was that I should be in control of my life, and that I believed I had to be the one in the driver's seat with all the plans. That night, when we sang that song, he told me I would be okay even when my world was turned on its head and my plans were ruined, because I shouldn't be the one making those plans anyways. I want to share a verse with you that was on a sticky note on my wall, which I call my battle wall, and I hung up lots of things that helped me get through this summer. Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." The story of Peter and walking on water also really spoke to me this summer. The disciples were all out on a boat together, and Jesus appeared to them walking on the water. The disciples saw him, and they were terrified. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith. Why did you doubt me?" I'm like Peter. This summer I was busy looking at the wind and the waves, and I was sinking. Yes, they were real, and yes, they were huge, but Peter's fears were also real. You shouldn't be able to walk on the water, but with Jesus, he could. God knew I wasn't strong enough to get through the challenges I faced on my own, and so he had people pre-planned and pre-placed in my life to come alongside me. A few of my closest friends had seen me go down emotionally, and they kept me busy daily doing anything from kayaking to watching movies or anything else that I could do. I struggled with not wanting to participate because I was feeling sorry for myself, but they wouldn't take no for an answer. God reached out and caught me through youth group, discipleship group, worship, and my friends, because he never throws us into a situation without the resources we need. If I'd kept my eyes on Jesus and off my circumstances, I would have seen that earlier. I'd love to say that the rest of the summer was bright and sunny, but that is not how it went down. In fact, it got a lot harder after then. A number of serious, unexpected challenges arose in both my family and my friendships after that. I was still pretty vulnerable, and each thing threatened to take me down. But I was at the end of myself over and over again, and knowing that God was with me didn't make any of those challenges go away or make them hurt less, but it did give me something to cling to in those dark times. I realized that if we could look consistently at Jesus and what he wants, we wouldn't struggle with our problems so much because we'd know that they aren't ours. Now, that's easier said than done, but some of the things that helped me keep my eyes on Jesus every day are reading my Bible every day, never missing church or youth group if I can help it, and praying whenever I feel attacked. At the end of the summer, I had the opportunity to go to Guatemala with the Crossroads mission team. Near the end of the trip, I got a very unexpected call. My little brother had been hit by a truck while riding his bike back home, and he was in the ER. Fear tried to take a hold of me, and for a moment, I felt helpless and out of control again. But this time, as shaken and devastated as I was, I knew that God was there with me. And I drew on my new habits of reaching out to him and was flooded with peace and knowledge, knowing that God had a plan for Micah and that nothing I did and no amount of worrying would change the situation. I was surrounded there by many strong prayer warriors, and so that's what we did. We just prayed. I know I wouldn't have handled the news the same way before redefining how I let God carry me through difficulties. But this time around, I'd had enough practice keeping my eyes off the storm and on God that I really did trust him, knowing my brother could die, but it was all in his plan. Looking back, I realized that without bottoming out, I would have never gotten to that point in my faith. Without some serious challenges and suffering, I wouldn't have ever realized I couldn't make it on my own. But God never wants me to be alone, and he never wants you to be alone. He wants us to walk with him and keep our eyes on him through the good and the bad times. He wants us to just say yes to his plan, and he wants to be the strength we need to get through it. Given the difficulties I've seen and the anxiety and emptiness I've felt when I'm completely focused on myself, I honestly don't think life would be worth very much if I wasn't living for God. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows, and the older I get, the more I realize that among the wins, there's also losses. And among the good times, there's also pain and heartbreak. Regardless of what God allows in my life from now on, good or bad, I pray that I'll always keep my eyes on him and what really matters. 1 year ago, I thought I was living my life for God. And back then, I would have tried to avoid dark times and suffering at all costs. But I've learned that sometimes suffering can take away our false sense of control. And when that happens, if we're willing, God can glorify himself and redeem us by shining his light in our darkness. When we go through hard times, and we all will, if we keep our eyes on the one who's in control, even though our lives may be painful and scary, God wants to show us that his love and his plan is far greater than what we could ever imagine.
You're 16? Like, seriously? Like 16? Did you hear what she said? My faith had to bottom out. I mean, where's that in the sales pitch of Christianity or the church? Come to Jesus, he's a sugar daddy. No, he's actually a real daddy who takes us where he needs to take us to get us to a place where he wants to grow us. And Katie, I just want to say thank you so much as a more than a 16-year-old that I am, that you as a 16-year-old woman, because you are a young woman, you're not a child, would have the whereabouts, Katie, to recognize that in the midst of a challenging year, challenging time, and that God would take you to a place where it felt like that your faith had bottomed out, that you would see his glory in the midst of that. And I want to say, as a pastor of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Katie, thank you for reminding us in the fullness and the bigness of who God is in the midst of everything, Ellie. And so we applaud you this morning for your heart. Thank you so much.